The drive back from my cardiologist's office takes exactly 22 minutes if you catch the lights on Meridian right. I know this because I have made that drive every 3 months for the past 4 years, ever since the doctors found the irregular rhythm and put me on a regimen of blood thinners that turned my internal chemistry into a fragile equation. I am 63 years old, a retired structural engineer. I spent 38 years of my life calculating wind loads, seismic shifts, and the crushing weight of gravity on steel. I don't guess. I measure. I know the way the late afternoon light falls across the Interstate 65 overpass, turning the concrete into a bruised shade of purple. I know which lane to occupy at the corner of 5th and Hargrove to bypass the school bus bottleneck without tapping my brakes. I know the exact mechanical 3-beat click my turn signal makes when I pull onto Crestwood Lane, the quiet oak-lined street where Linda and I have lived for 31 years. 31 years. That is 11,315 days. That is thousands of shared morning coffees, a mortgage paid off in full, and a lifetime of believing that the person sleeping 3 inches away from you is the solid foundation of your existence. But as I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday in October, I didn't know that the foundation had been hollowed out by termites I hadn't even heard chewing. I almost didn't see the note. It was tucked under my windshield wiper, a small white square against the black rubber. I almost flicked it away thinking it was just another flyer for a lawn service or a pizza joint. But something in the way it was folded stopped me. It was a single sheet torn from a legal pad, yellow-lined, the kind my neighbor Russell always kept on his kitchen counter. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, the ink pressed so hard into the paper that the letters felt like braille on the reverse side. Don't go inside. Come to my house first. I have something you need to see. Do not ignore this. Russell. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, a rhythmic metallic counting of seconds. A mockingbird screamed from the oak tree at the edge of my driveway, a piercing, ugly sound that tore through the suburban silence. I looked at my front door, the same red door Linda had picked out in 1993 because she said it made the house look welcoming. For the first time in 3 decades, the sight of it made my chest go tight in a way that had nothing to do with my heart condition. I put the car in reverse, the tires crunching on the gravel like bone, and pulled into Russell's driveway next door. He was standing on his porch before I even killed the ignition. Russell is 71, a retired postal inspector. He spent 40 years noticing the things people tried to hide in plain sight. He had that look on his face, the crime scene look. He didn't say hello. He just held the screen door open and gestured with a sharp, urgent tilt of his head. "Come in, Arthur." "Sit down," he said. His voice was gravelly, devoid of the usual neighborly warmth. His living room smelled like stale coffee and the cedar blocks he kept in his closets. Russell had been a widower for 6 years, and his house was neat as a pin, the kind of obsessive order a man maintains when the person who made the mess of life worth living is gone. He didn't waste time with small talk. He set a laptop on the coffee table and turned the screen toward me. "Before I show you this," Russell said, his eyes locking onto mine with the weight of a lead pipe, "I want you to know I wasn't spying on you. I installed this camera after those package thefts hit the block last spring. It covers my driveway and the street. I didn't know it was going to catch what it caught." "Show me, Russell," I said. My voice sounded thin, like dry paper rubbing against a stone. He pressed play. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago, a Thursday, 11:14 a.m. Every Thursday for 2 years I'd been at my woodworking class at the community center. It was the only time I was consistently and predictably out of the house. On the screen, a gray sedan I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. The driver stayed inside for a full minute, scanning the street. Then my red front door opened. Linda stepped out. She looked radiant, wearing the blue silk scarf I'd bought her for our last anniversary. Behind her came a man, tall, maybe 50, wearing a crisp button-down with the sleeves rolled up. They stood on my porch talking. Not like strangers. They stood close, their bodies angled toward each other in the universal language of established intimacy. Then Linda handed him an envelope. It was thick, stuffed to the point where the paper was strained. He tucked it into his jacket pocket, touched her elbow in a lingering, possessive way that made my stomach lurch, and walked back to the sedan. Russell paused the video. "That's not the first time, Arthur. That's just the first time I thought to check the logs. He's been here every Thursday since the end of August." He showed me 3 more clips. 4 visits over 6 weeks. Always on a Thursday. Always while I was at the shop learning how to cut dovetail joints. "Who is he?" I asked. My hands were gripping the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles were white. "I didn't know at first," Russell said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "But I ran the plate the last time he showed up. His name is Marcus Thorne, senior associate at Hartfield and Greer. I felt the blood drain from my face. Hartfield and Greer wasn't a divorce firm. They were a boutique estate planning and probate firm. Linda and I have our wills done, Russell. We've had them for 20 years. I haven't signed a thing. I haven't even seen a lawyer in 5 years. There's one more thing, Russell said, and this time he couldn't look me in the eye. He pulled up a different file on his laptop. My daughter works as a clerk at the county courthouse. I asked her to run your name last week. I had a bad feeling, Arthur. I wanted to be wrong. He turned the laptop back to me. It was a formal petition. The language was cold, clinical, and designed to strip a human being of their soul. Petition for appointment of emergency guardian and declaration of legal incapacity. The document was a masterpiece of fiction. It alleged that I, Arthur Vance, was suffering from rapidly progressing cognitive decline, episodes of paranoid confusion, and erratic behavior, brought on by my heart condition and blood-thinning medication. It cited documented instances of my inability to manage basic household finances, and claimed I had become a danger to our shared assets. And there, at the bottom of the petition, providing the foundational testimony that I was no longer a man, but a legal non-entity, was a signature I'd know anywhere. It was my son's signature. David. My only child. The boy I'd taught to read a level and drive a stick shift. He was 34 now, a commercial real estate broker in Atlanta. He was Mom's favorite, sure, but I never imagined he was a tool she could use to dismantle me. He signed it, Russell, I whispered. He signed an affidavit saying I'm losing my mind. He did, Russell said, his voice soft now. And the hearing is in 12 days. If the judge signs this, Linda gets total power of attorney. She gets the house, the retirement accounts, the brokerage. You get a room in a managed care facility and a monthly allowance, she decides. They aren't just leaving you, Arthur. They're erasing you. I stood up. I didn't feel shaky anymore. I felt cold. A strange, vibrating clarity settled over me. I am a structural engineer. When a bridge is failing, you don't cry about the rust. You find the point of failure and you isolate it. I have to go home, I said. Arthur, don't do anything stupid, Russell warned, standing with me. She doesn't know you know. Keep it that way. If she knows the trap is sprung, she'll move the money faster. Right now, she thinks she's playing a man who can't remember his own name. I walked back across the lawn. The red door was open now. I could smell the rosemary chicken Linda was roasting in the oven. It was my favorite meal. Every Tuesday. For years, the consistency of it made me feel safe, cherished. Now it felt like the scent of a lure. I walked into the kitchen. Linda was humming a tune, her back to me as she basted the bird. She turned and gave me that bright, rehearsed smile, the one I had believed in for 11,315 days. How was the cardiologist, honey? She asked, her voice like warm honey. Everything okay with the ticker? No new rhythms. I looked at her. I saw the woman who had shared my bed for 30 years. I also saw the woman who was currently working with a lawyer to turn me into a ghost. The doctor said my heart is stronger than it looks, Linda. I said, my voice as steady as a load-bearing wall. He said I've got plenty of life left in me. I hope you're ready for that. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just smiled and asked if I wanted a glass of red wine. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the shadows of the oak tree dancing on the ceiling. I realized that my marriage wasn't just over. It was a heist. And the two people I loved most were the ones holding the crowbars. I waited until I heard her breathing turn into the slow, heavy rhythm of deep sleep. Then I got up, moved silently to the basement and pulled out my old engineering blueprints. Hidden beneath the plans for the Crestwood Bridge project was a small floor safe. I opened it and pulled out a single business card. Patricia Vance. No relation, but she was a shark of a probate lawyer who had handled my father's complicated estate. I didn't need a divorce lawyer. I didn't need a counselor. I needed a demolition expert. Patricia, I whispered into the phone in the dark of the basement, the cold concrete floor biting into my feet. I found a massive structural failure in my life. I need to bring the whole thing down. And I need to make sure the people who tried to pull the supports out are buried in the rubble. I looked at the blueprints on the table. In 12 days they wanted to declare me incompetent. In 12 days they wanted my life. They had no idea that an engineer knows exactly how much pressure it takes to make a world collapse. And I was about to apply every ounce of it. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table and watched Linda spread marmalade on her toast with a precision that used to fascinate me. Now it looked like a surgeon preparing an incision. She was wearing her gardening gloves, talking about the hydrangeas and the autumn frost. To any passerby looking through our window, it was a postcard of domestic bliss, a silver-haired couple enjoying the fruits of a 31-year labor. To me, it was like watching a master forger at work. Every "dear" and "honey" she uttered was a calculated vibration, a structural dampener designed to keep the building standing just long enough for her to pull the final load-bearing pin. "I have some errands to run today, Arthur," she said, her voice light, almost melodic. She finally looked up, her eyes scanning my face for any sign of the man who used to lead a firm of 50 engineers. "Why don't you stay home and rest? You seemed a bit distracted yesterday. Fumbling with your keys, staring at the walls. Maybe it's the new heart medication. It can cause a bit of brain fog," the doctor said. The new medication. I hadn't changed my meds in 6 months. She was already seeding the narrative, planting the idea of my decline into the very air we breathed. She wanted me to doubt my own pulse. I looked at her, and for a split second the engineer in me wanted to roar. I wanted to flip the oak table and scream that I'd seen the petition, that I'd seen her with Thorne on the porch, that I knew she was trying to bury me in a gilded cage. But I didn't. In my profession, if you vent the steam too early, the boiler doesn't explode. It just stops working. And I needed this boiler to explode at exactly the right moment. "You're right, Linda," I said, my voice as flat and unyielding as a spirit level. "I've been feeling a bit untethered. I think I'll just stay in the den and try to finish that biography." The moment her gray sedan pulled out of the driveway and the sound of the engine faded into the distance, the fog evaporated. I didn't go to the den. I went to the basement, into the cold, quiet space where I kept my tools and my secrets. I met Patricia Vance in a windowless office in the city 3 hours later. She didn't offer me coffee, and she didn't offer me sympathy. She was a woman who dealt in the hard, cold currency of evidence. I laid out the footage from Russell, the name of Marcus Thorne, and the incapacity petition. "They're moving with extreme velocity, Arthur," Patricia said, her eyes scanning the documents with the speed of a predator. "An emergency guardianship petition is a blitzkrieg tactic. They want to freeze your assets and strip your legal standing before you even realize you're in a fight. They're betting on the fact that you're actually as weak as they've told the court you are. They didn't realize you had an early warning system in the house next door." "What about the money, Patricia?" "Show me the math," I said. My engineer's brain needed to see the numbers. Over the next 10 days, Patricia's forensic accountants performed a digital autopsy on my marriage. I spent those days living a double life that would have pulverized a weaker man. Every evening, I sat across from Linda and ate her rosemary chicken. I listened to her talk about David's big promotion and his busy life in Atlanta. I played the part of the fading patriarch to perfection. I'd forget the name of a common tool. I'd ask her the same question twice. I watched her eyes light up with a sick, hidden satisfaction every time I played the part. She wasn't looking at her husband. She was looking at a winning lottery ticket that just needed to be validated by a judge. On the 8th day, Patricia called me to her office. She pushed a thick black binder toward me. "It's methodical, Arthur." "Chillingly so," Patricia said. "Our joint brokerage account, the one you spent 38 years funding with your sweat and your stress, has been hemorrhaging. It wasn't a sudden heist. That would have triggered a red flag at the compliance department. She's been making small lifestyle transfers for 14 months. 800 here, 2,000 there. All of it funneling into a private shell account in her name only at a credit union 2 counties over." I looked at the final tally at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $242,500. "That's my retirement, Patricia," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "That's the fund for David's kids' college. That's the safety net for the home we built. She's been siphoning my life out of me one drop at a time." "It gets worse," Patricia said, her voice dropping an octave. "The attorney, Marcus Thorne? He isn't just drafting a new will. He's preparing a revised family trust. If the incapacity petition is granted on Thursday, the deed to this house, the house on Crestwood, is transferred immediately to a holding company controlled by Linda and David. You would be a guest in your own home, Arthur. Or more likely, a liability they can move to a facility once the property is sold." The air in the room felt thin, like I was standing on top of a bridge with no railings. I thought of David. I thought of the boy I taught to calculate load weights. I thought of the pride in his voice when he closed his first real estate deal. Had he always been this hollow? Or had Linda spent years whispering poison into his ear, telling him his father was a confused old man who was squandering the inheritance? "I need more than bank statements," I said, the engineer in me shifting into a dark, technical gear. "I need them on the record. I need to see the betrayal in high definition. On Russell's advice, I didn't just hire a lawyer, I went back to my roots of surveillance and precision. I spent $1,200 on high-end pinhole cameras, the kind used for corporate espionage. I installed 3 of them in the house, one in the home office where Linda kept her private laptop, one in the hallway near the filing cabinet, and one in the garage. I set them up to feed directly to a secure, encrypted cloud server that only Patricia and I could access. 48 hours before the hearing, I got the structural failure I was looking for. The camera in the home office caught Linda on a late-night phone call. She was sitting at the mahogany desk I'd built for her, holding a glass of expensive Cabernet, her face twisted into a look of pure, predatory calculation. "He's getting worse, David," she said into the phone, her voice dripping with a fake, theatrical concern that made my skin crawl as I watched the recording in a motel room 6 miles away. "He forgot the doctor's name twice today. He's staring out the window for hours. It won't be much longer, honey. Once the judge signs the emergency order on Thursday, we can start the transfer of the Crestwood property. Thorne says the holding company is registered and ready. You'll have your consulting fee for the real estate flip, and I'll finally have some peace from this shell of a man." She paused, listening to my son's voice on the other end. I watched her sip the wine, her eyes cold as marbles. "Don't you dare feel guilty," she snapped, her voice turning sharp. "He's not the man who raised you anymore. He's just a medical bill waiting to happen. We're doing him a favor, David. He'd want the money to stay in the family, wouldn't he? It's better this way than letting him blow it all on woodworking projects or legal fees once his mind truly goes. We're just accelerating the inevitable." I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking from fear anymore. They were vibrating with the kinetic energy of a building right before the demolition charges are detonated. I went home that night and sat on the back porch steps. I looked at the wood, the grain was dry, the sealant peeling. I'd been meaning to refinish them for 2 years, but I'd been too busy being a husband. I looked at the red door. It wasn't a symbol of a welcoming home anymore. It was the entrance to a vault I'd been locked inside for 3 decades, and I was the only one who didn't know the combination had been changed. Linda came out and stood behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder. I felt a surge of revulsion so powerful it was a miracle I didn't strike her hand away. "What are you thinking about, Arthur?" she asked softly, her breath smelling of rosemary and wine. "I'm thinking about load-bearing structures, Linda," I said, staring out into the dark yard where the shadows of the oaks looked like jagged teeth. "I'm thinking about how much weight a single lie can hold before the entire span snaps and drops everyone into the canyon." "You always were so deep," she chuckled, patting my hand as if I were a child. "Come inside. It's getting cold and you need your rest. Big day at the doctor tomorrow, remember?" I stood up and followed her in. I looked at her back, the woman I had protected, provided for, and loved, and I felt a cold, engineering clarity. Tomorrow wasn't a doctor's appointment. Tomorrow was the day I pulled the pins. I had the footage. I had the forensic bank records. I had the incapacity petition. And I had David's signature on a document that was about to become his social and professional suicide note. The engineer was done calculating. The stress test was over. It was time for the controlled collapse. The morning of the hearing was cold, the kind of biting, needle-sharp Ohio chill that makes the air feel brittle, like it might shatter if you speak too loud. I woke up at 5 a.m. long before the sun or Linda. I sat in the dark of my study, wearing my best charcoal suit, the 3-piece I'd bought for David's graduation years ago. I checked my pulse. 68 beats per minute. Steady. Rhythmic. Perfectly engineered. My heart wasn't failing, it was calibrating. Linda came downstairs at 7:30, already wearing her grieving wife ensemble, a soft, muted gray dress, minimal makeup, and a look of practiced, saintly exhaustion. She saw me sitting there, fully dressed, the morning light glinting off my polished shoes, and for the first time in months, a flicker of genuine, jagged confusion crossed her face. "Arthur? Why are you in a suit?" "We're just going to the consultant's office to finalize those health documents," she said, her voice wavering just a fraction, the warm honey tone cracking like old varnish. "I decided I wanted to look like myself today, Linda," I said, standing up with a smoothness that shouldn't have been possible for a man she claimed couldn't remember his own middle name. I picked up my heavy leather briefcase, the one containing 47 pages of legal napalm. "In case I forget who that is later. It's important to leave a good impression, don't you think?" The drive to the courthouse was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I didn't take the lights on Meridian. I let her drive. I sat in the passenger seat and watched her hands on the steering wheel, the hands that had signed the illegal transfers, the hands that had touched Marcus Thorne's elbow on my porch. I felt nothing but a cold, architectural curiosity about how she would look when the roof finally fell in. We walked into courtroom 4B. The air smelled of old paper and stale floor wax. Marcus Thorne was already there, looking every bit the predatory estate shark in a $1,000 suit, leaning over the gallery rail as if he owned the building. And then I saw him. David. My son had flown in from Atlanta. He wouldn't look at me. He stood near the window, staring at the gray sky, looking like a man who was trying to convince himself he was committing a mercy killing for the greater good of his inheritance. Mr. Vance, Thorne said, stepping forward with an oily, practiced smile. Glad you could make it. This will be quick. Just a few formalities to ensure your affairs are protected from your own lapses. I'm sure they will be, I said, my voice echoing in the hollow room. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Holloway who looked like she'd survived 1,000 lies, took the bench. She looked at the petition, then at me, then at Linda. Mr. Vance, do you understand why we are here today? Your wife and son have filed an emergency petition regarding your capacity to manage your own life and assets. They claim your heart condition has led to significant cognitive impairment. I understand their stated intent, Your Honor, I said, standing up. I didn't lean on the mahogany table. I stood straight, the way I used to when defending $1 million bridge design to a skeptical city council. But before we proceed with their version of my reality, I believe my counsel has a few structural concerns to bring to the court's attention regarding the veracity of this petition. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a theatrical boom. Patricia Vance walked in like a thunderstorm. She didn't say a word to Thorne, she just dropped 3 thick black binders onto the bailiff's desk with a sound like a gunshot. Your Honor, Patricia's voice rang out, vibrating with authority, we are filing a cross-petition for immediate dismissal, along with a formal criminal complaint for elder financial exploitation, fraud, and systematic embezzlement. The room went vacuum-sealed quiet. I watched Linda's face. The concerned wife, mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated, revealing the panicked, ugly face of the predator underneath. What is this? Thorne sputtered, turning to the judge, his face turning a blotchy red. This is a capacity hearing, not a... This, Patricia interrupted, is a crime scene. Your Honor, Exhibit A contains forensic accounting of the Vance joint brokerage. Over the last 14 months, exactly $242,500 has been siphoned by the petitioner, Linda Vance, into a private shell account. Exhibit B is a series of high-definition video recordings from the Vance residence. They show the petitioner and her counsel, Mr. Thorne, conspiring to fabricate symptoms of dementia, even discussing which episodes to report to my client's son to ensure his signature on the affidavit. I looked at David. He had finally looked up. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked at the binder, then at his mother, then at me. And Exhibit C, Patricia continued, her voice dropping to a low, lethal hum that filled every corner of the room, is a recording from 48 hours ago. It features Mrs. Vance and her son, David, discussing the consulting fee he was promised from the liquidated sale of my client's home. A sale that could only happen if this court declared an innocent, sane man a legal ghost. David? I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. In that silent room my voice sounded like a landslide. Is that what I'm worth to you? A consulting fee on the house I built for you to grow up in? My son didn't just break, he imploded. He slumped into the gallery bench, his head in his hands, and started to sob, a raw, guttural sound. It wasn't the sound of a man who was sorry, it was the sound of a man who realized he'd been caught helping the devil rob his own father. Your Honor, I didn't know about the money. David choked out, his voice cracking. She told me he was dying. She said he was losing his mind, that he was going to burn through the family's future on medical bills and delusional projects. She said we were protecting him from himself. By burying him alive? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Linda didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat there, frozen, staring at the binders on the table as if they were a monster that had just crawled out of the floorboards. She realized then that the confused old man she'd been mocking for months, the one she called a shell in her secret calls, had been the one holding the stopwatch the whole time. The engineer had been calculating the exact moment of her collapse. Judge Holloway didn't need a recess. She didn't even need a second opinion. Mr. Thorne, the judge said, her voice vibrating with a quiet, terrifying rage. I am referring your conduct to the State Bar Association for immediate disbarment proceedings. You will stay in this courtroom until the sheriff's deputies arrive. Mrs. Vance, your petition is not only dismissed, It is being turned over to the district attorney's office for a criminal investigation into financial exploitation. You are ordered to vacate the Crestwood property within 24 hours. You will touch nothing that does not belong to you. The aftermath was a cold, clinical blur of blue lights and legal ink. Thorne was let out in handcuffs. It turned out I wasn't his only victim. I was just the only one who fought back with a blueprint. Linda didn't go to jail that day, but the reduced charge plea she eventually took cost her every shred of her social standing. The $242,500 was clawed back from her Shell account down to the very last penny. The fines and legal fees wiped out her remaining personal savings. I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday in February. It was a clear morning. I drove home from Patricia's office, caught every light on Meridian perfectly, 22 minutes on the dot, and pulled into my driveway. Russell was out there checking his mailbox. He saw my car and gave me a slow, respectful nod. I walked over and handed him a bottle of the most expensive bourbon I could find. "You saved my life, Russell," I said. "Nah," he grunted. "I just showed you the crack in the beam. You're the one who knew how to trigger the demolition." I walked to my front door. It wasn't red anymore. I'd spent the weekend stripping the paint, sanding it down to the raw grain, and repainting it a deep, midnight navy. It looked solid. It looked like it could hold back a hurricane. David called me that night. I finally picked up. "Dad," he whispered, "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix a total structural collapse, David," I said, looking out at the back porch steps we'd once built together. "But you can clear the rubble. You can start by telling the truth to everyone you lied to. And then, maybe in a few years we can talk about a new foundation. But for now the site is closed." I hung up. I went to my woodworking bench in the basement. I had a new project. A bookcase made of solid, ancient oak. No veneer. No hidden joints. Just clean, honest lines and a structure that would outlive the memory of this betrayal. I am 63 years old. I live alone in a house built for a family that didn't exist. Some mornings the silence is heavy. But mostly it's just quiet. And in that quiet I can hear my own heart, beating in a rhythm that finally, perfectly belongs to me. The demolition was a success. The site is clear. And for the first time in 31 years, I know exactly what I'm standing on. The foundation is solid.